Solomon and the ancient art of alchemical control. He wasn't turning lead into gold, he was turning chaos into order, ignorance into wisdom, and man into something divine. Alchemy has long been misunderstood as a primitive form of chemistry, or the foolish hunt for gold. But true alchemy is spiritual. It's the science of transformation, of taking what is base and refining it into something noble. And when it comes to spiritual alchemy, few figures stand taller than King Solomon. Though never named an alchemist in the traditional sense, Solomon's wisdom, rituals, symbols, and temple all echo alchemical principles. He wasn't melting metals, he was melting the soul. Solomon's role as a master of transformation begins with the construction of the temple. In esoteric traditions, the temple is not merely a structure, it is a diagram of the human being. Its proportions, materials, and rituals encode a system of cosmic harmony. The dimensions align with sacred geometry, and the process of building it mirrors the alchemical stages: nigredo, blackening; albedo, whitening; citrinitas, yellowing; and rubedo, reddening. In nigredo, the soul is broken down. In Solomon's story, this corresponds to the confrontation with demons, chaos, and unclean forces. Rather than destroy them, Solomon uses their energy to lay the foundation. This is the alchemical principle of putrefaction, breaking apart so that rebuilding may begin. In albedo, purification occurs. The temple is sanctified, and rituals of incense, cleansing, and divine names are performed. This aligns with Solomon's invocation of angels, his communion with heaven. Citrinitas marks awakening, wisdom dawning. This is Solomon's divine wisdom, his judgment, his rule over Israel with understanding. Finally, rubedo, the completed soul. The temple is finished. The divine presence enters. Even the materials used, gold, silver, cedar, bronze, are not just luxury items. In alchemical language, they represent stages and substances of transformation. Gold, the incorruptible, is the final state of the perfected self. It is not something found, it is created through process, through fire, through trials. Solomon's temple becomes the furnace in which both materials and man are transmuted. Solomon's seal, often drawn as an interlocking triangle or hexagram, is another alchemical key. It represents the union of opposites, fire and water, spirit and matter. The upward triangle is masculine and spiritual. The downward is feminine and material. Their balance is the goal of all alchemy, the creation of the philosopher's stone, the inner state of eternal harmony. Legends also tell of Solomon's mastery over spirits, which in alchemical terms is mastery over internal energies, desires, fears, instincts. By binding these forces and assigning them roles in his divine work, he achieves what every alchemist seeks: control over the lower nature. In this view, Solomon doesn't just build a temple, he builds the alchemist's laboratory, where every stone, every tool, every chant is part of a grand process of elevation. His writings, particularly in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, are filled with alchemical insight hidden in plain sight. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Here is the principle of friction, of opposition breeding refinement. The crucible is for silver, and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests hearts. This is pure alchemical doctrine. The heart is tested in the furnace of life until it becomes pure gold. The Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon is not just a tale of diplomatic charm. Esoterically, she represents the feminine, the intuitive, the soul's mystery. Her questions test Solomon's wisdom, and their union, whether symbolic or literal, represents the integration of opposites. It is the sacred marriage of alchemical tradition, the conjunction that precedes the final transmutation. Even the fall of Solomon contains hidden meaning. When he succumbs to pride and foreign idols, he disturbs the balance. The alchemist who forgets the sacred and seeks only power creates poison. The philosopher's stone is not only rare, it is easily lost. Modern esoteric traditions, from Hermeticism to Rosicrucianism, trace parts of their symbolic systems back to Solomon's work. Whether real or mythic, Solomon's image as an alchemical king remains powerful. His story is a reminder: Transformation is possible, but only through conscious work. Every act of wisdom, every disciplined ritual, every moment of humility is another turn of the spiritual retort, another step toward gold. Freemasons still build his temple, but not with stones. The blueprints are ancient, but the construction is eternal. Freemasonry is one of the most mysterious and misunderstood societies in the modern world. Often accused of secrecy, occultism, or shadowy power, its actual origins lie in allegory, philosophy, and sacred architecture. And at the heart of all its teachings is one man, King Solomon. But the Masons are not reconstructing a building, they are reconstructing the soul. In Masonic tradition, the Temple of Solomon is not just a monument of the past, it is the spiritual ideal. It is the perfect building because it reflects divine order. Every stone is shaped by intent, every tool is a moral teaching, every degree of initiation is a stage in personal refinement, and every Mason is a builder, not of walls but of character. The temple symbolizes the human body, the human life, and the path to inner light. Just as Solomon oversaw its construction using sacred geometry and divine principles, the Mason builds their inner self with wisdom, strength, and beauty, the three pillars of Masonic philosophy. The tools of the Mason are deeply symbolic. The square represents morality, the compass represents spiritual boundaries, the plumb line is uprightness, the level is equality. These aren't just instruments, they're virtues encoded into ritual. To the initiated, to build the temple is to become upright in thought, precise in word, and pure in deed. Central to Masonic lore is Hiram Abiff, the master architect of Solomon's temple. He is murdered for refusing to reveal the master's word, but his death is not an end, it's a metaphor. The initiate must undergo symbolic death before rebirth into greater light. The Masons, like Solomon, are on a path of hidden knowledge not to dominate, but to transform. Each degree of Masonry, entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master Mason, mirrors Solomon's journey, learning, building, mastering. Initiates pass through veils of secrecy, not because of elitism, but because truth must be earned. The uninitiated can't grasp the mysteries without the experience. This echoes the esoteric view of Solomon. Knowledge is sacred and must be approached with reverence. But why Solomon? Because his temple was the place where spirit and structure met. It was a map of the cosmos, a mirror of the soul. It was a building made by angels and demons, by stone and symbol. For Masons, rebuilding this temple is an endless task. Each time they meet in lodge, they lay a new stone in the heart. Each time they speak truth, they polish the soul. Freemasonry is often accused of being a religion. It is not. It is a system of morality veiled in allegory. It doesn't replace faith, it deepens it. It honors Solomon, not because of dogma, but because of archetype. He is the wise king, the builder, the seeker, the judge. He is the model of what humanity can become when it aligns with divine wisdom. Even today, Masonic temples reflect the layout of Solomon's temple. The east is the source of light, where the worshipful master sits. The pillars Jason and Boaz stand at the entrance, representing duality and balance. The floor is a checkered pattern, light and dark, reminding every Mason that life is a blend of both, and wisdom walks between. The rituals are filled with echoes of the past, prayers to the great architect of the universe, oaths upon sacred texts, symbolic deaths and resurrections. And though each Mason walks a personal path, they all share one goal: to become a living temple where divine light may dwell. So yes, the Freemasons still build Solomon's temple, but not with stone. They build it with discipline, with symbols, with secrets, with service. And in doing so, they carry forward the true legacy of the esoteric king, not a legacy of wealth or conquest, but of transformation, the temple that exists only in consciousness. There is a temple that no hand has built, no eye has seen, and yet it is more real than stone because it lives within you. In stories of King Solomon, the Temple of Jerusalem stands as a mighty symbol, sacred, powerful, divine. But behind the grandeur of gold and stone lies another temple, hidden not in the earth, but in the realm of human consciousness. It is this inner temple that true seekers of the esoteric path have pursued for centuries. King Solomon, famed for his wisdom, understood that spiritual mastery does not come from building monuments outside, but from refining the structures within. The physical temple was just a shadow, a representation. The real temple, the one that touched heaven, was in his mind, his soul, and his disciplined spirit. When we hear the word temple, we imagine walls, altars, pillars. But in esoteric tradition, the temple is the awakened state of consciousness, where the mind becomes silent, the heart becomes pure, and the soul becomes the throne of divine presence. Solomon's true greatness was not his wealth or his empire. It was that he accessed this sacred inner space and ruled it before he ruled anything else. This inner temple isn't built in a day. Like Solomon's construction that took years, your spiritual temple must be built layer by layer, with each thought, each intention, each act of self-mastery. The materials are not cedar or gold, but silence, discipline, compassion, and truth. Every part of Solomon's temple had meaning. The two great pillars, Boaz and Jachin, weren't just architectural. They symbolized strength and stability in the duality of life. In the temple of consciousness, these are the inner forces we must balance: willpower and wisdom, emotion and logic, masculine and feminine, inner and outer. Solomon didn't just understand this, he embodied it. When you enter the temple of consciousness, you begin to see the world differently. You don't just react, you respond. You don't just seek power, you seek alignment. In this temple, your thoughts are prayers, your breath is sacred, and your presence is an altar where divine intelligence reveals itself. King Solomon's prayers in the temple weren't just for blessings, they were for understanding. In your own spiritual temple, you too can ask, "Give your servant an understanding heart." That one request changed his destiny, and it can change yours. The Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple was a secret chamber, silent and still, where the Ark of the Covenant was placed. In your inner temple, this corresponds to the deepest part of you, the silent center where your highest truth lives. This is where the presence of the divine touches your consciousness. You don't have to be a king to access this. The inner temple opens to the sincere, the humble, the one who seeks truth above all. Each moment of stillness, every act of inner reflection, every confrontation with your own shadow, these are bricks in the spiritual structure. As Solomon built a temple for God, you are meant to build a consciousness that reflects divinity, not in belief alone, but in being. The temple isn't far. It's not in Jerusalem. It's in your breath, your silence, your awareness. So next time you hear the story of Solomon's temple, don't look for it in ancient maps. Look for it within. The blueprint is already inside you, waiting to be followed. Build it, not for the world to see, but for your soul to enter. That is where the true temple stands, untouched by time, immune to ruin, eternal in light. Solomon's ring, weapon or mirror. They say Solomon wore a ring that controlled demons. But what if that ring didn't give him power over others, but revealed the truth within himself? The story of Solomon's ring has traveled through time like a whisper from a forgotten world. A simple golden band, engraved with divine symbols, said to command spirits and grant authority over hidden realms. But in the esoteric view, this was no ordinary ring, and it was never just about power. The real question isn't what did the ring control, but what did it reflect? According to legend, the ring was inscribed with the name of God, granting Solomon mastery over the spiritual and material realms. With it, he bound spirits to build the temple, decoded the language of birds, and discerned truth from lies. But in hidden teachings, the ring is less about control and more about awareness. It's a mirror of the self, one that forces the wearer to face all parts of who they are. The so-called demons Solomon controlled, they weren't monsters from outside, they were archetypes from within. They were desires, fears, instincts, suppressed energies, chaotic forces that most people ignore or deny. Solomon, through the wisdom of the ring, confronted these energies, named them, understood them, and ultimately integrated them. That's what real mastery looks like. The ring gave him dominion, yes, but not because it enslaved spirits. It gave him dominion because he was willing to know himself completely. The esoteric path always brings you back to this. Know thyself and you shall know the universe. Imagine wearing such a ring. Every lie you tell yourself, every hidden wound, every illusion, it all rises to the surface. Most would crumble under that truth. But Solomon faced it, and that's why he ruled, not just over a kingdom but over his inner world. In Kabbalistic thought, the ring can represent the circle of consciousness, the unbroken unity of divine will and human choice. The inscription, the divine name, is a code for alignment with cosmic law. To wear the ring is to live in accordance with truth so deep it transforms your reality. So was it a weapon? Perhaps, but not against others. It was a weapon against illusion, against ignorance, against ego. It cut through falsehood like a sword of light. But it was also a mirror. It didn't just show Solomon the darkness. It showed him the divinity buried beneath that darkness. The ring reminds us that true spiritual power doesn't come from domination. It comes from integration. You cannot rule what you do not understand, and you cannot understand what you refuse to face. This is why Solomon's wisdom remains unmatched. He saw both light and shadow, and he refused to reject either. He didn't banish the spirits. He worked with them. He named them, organized them, gave them purpose. In doing so, he brought order to chaos, not by suppression, but by reconciliation. And so, in your own life, ask, what is your ring? What power have you been given, not to control others, but to awaken yourself? What truths are you afraid to face, and what would happen if you faced them? The ring isn't lost. It never was, because the ring isn't metal. It's insight. And when you see yourself clearly, fully, bravely, when you name your own spirits and guide them instead of fearing them, you become a king in your own right, just like Solomon. The spirits were not evil. They were aspects of the self. What if the demons Solomon summoned were never evil, just misunderstood parts of his own soul? When we hear about spirits, jinn, or demons in ancient texts, our minds jump to fear, darkness, possession. But the esoteric wisdom passed down through centuries teaches something far more powerful and far more personal. The spirits Solomon controlled were not enemies. They were fragments of the human psyche. Solomon's grimoire, known in mystical circles as the Lesser Key of Solomon, speaks of 72 spirits he bound and commanded. But deeper teachings say these weren't actual external beings. They were inner forces, emotions, instincts, memories, traumas, desires, each with its own nature, language, and power. Solomon's greatness wasn't in forcing them to obey. It was in understanding their purpose. Each spirit represents a different part of the human experience: anger, ambition, creativity, jealousy, intuition, lust, fear, pride. Most people suppress these parts or let them control them unconsciously. Solomon did neither. He called them forward, gave them names, listened to them, and transformed their energy. That's the hidden art of alchemy, not turning lead to gold, but turning chaos into consciousness. The 72 spirits can be seen as psychological archetypes. Just like in Jungian psychology, these archetypes live in the collective unconscious. They appear in dreams, moods, and sudden reactions. They are not evil, but if left unacknowledged, they can become destructive. Solomon's magic was psychological mastery. He wasn't exorcising demons, he was integrating the self. To deny these inner aspects is to remain incomplete. To face them, understand them, and work with them is to become whole. Solomon mapped the human soul, not with fear but with precision and courage. In esoteric symbolism, every shadow hides a gift. Anger can become courage. Lust can become passion. Pride can become leadership, but only when brought into the light. Solomon's spirits weren't enemies. They were energies looking for guidance. He became their master by becoming their teacher. The seal he used to bind them wasn't just magical. It was symbolic. The seal of Solomon, two interlocking triangles, represents the union of opposites: heaven and earth, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious. In binding the spirits, he wasn't imprisoning them. He was reconciling them, bringing harmony where there was once conflict. What if you could do the same? What if the parts of you that you reject, your fears, Your desires, your doubts, were not flaws but forces waiting for guidance. What if your anxiety was actually a messenger? What if your anger was a signal for change? What if your sadness was a doorway to compassion? To walk the path of Solomon is to meet every part of yourself, not with judgment, but with awareness. It is to listen deeply, to name your spirits, to give them structure, to become the ruler of your own inner kingdom. This is not myth, this is practice. You don't need a throne to be sovereign. You just need to stop running from yourself, because in the end, there are no evil spirits, only unclaimed parts of the self. When Solomon faced them, he became whole. When you face yours, so will you.